My lord, sectors 5, 6, and 8 of the northern manufacturing district have fallen.
Excellent. This siege has gone on for long enough. Box in the remaining loyalists and saturate their ramshackle defenses with artillery fire at once.
Yes, Lord Desicrus. I've also come to inform you that...
What was that?
What I came to inform you of. The Astartes kill team is not a kill team. They only have one member.
Then let us not waste any more time. I want to see this last Marine slaughtered with my very own eyes.
My lord, I did not say one remaining. I said it was a single Marine, clad in golden armor.
A celestial lion then. The poor cub has strayed too far from the pack, it seems.
No, my lord, they are...
Is that the sector that they are boxed in? Sector 7?
Yes, my lord, but they have been holding it by...
Stand aside. I want this world to hear my last words, to be the last ones graced by them in this wretched life. Give me that box. Attention, loyalist care. Lay down your weapons and your death will be swift. We have you surrounded. Engaging the enemy! I am surrounded by fear and dead men.
Alright, who here remembers Greek mythology? The actual myth, tales, and fables, which I'm told are 3 separate things, and I'm purely saying this because I know there's some literature nerd out there that's going to get pissed at me for saying that. Anyways, don't worry about it. I get it. One thing I always liked about Greek mythology, or at least, you know, modern versions of them, since the messages behind them can be a bit messed up. Seriously, being a woman in Greek mythology was basically hell. But besides that, the stories of heroes going off on great journeys, fighting monsters, or even standing against the gods themselves at times, forever being immortalized as a myth themselves. Heracles, Odysseus, Theseus, Perseus, Atalanta even, but once again, Greeks and women. The entire point that I'm trying to get at is that the stories of a man, in the case of some of them a demigod, goes off and does some insane feats. But the point of these stories is that it's to either inspire you with some sort of a message or a lesson, or it's just some other arbitrary garbage. Seriously, what were the Greeks trying to teach back then? Regardless, the stories end. But what if that just didn't need to happen? What if Odysseus kept traveling the world? What if Heracles didn't stop with the 13 labors and kept pushing? What if Theseus didn't stop with the Minotaur and vowed to slay all monsters of the world? What if these people got together? What if you had a band of demigods? That is what the Emperor thought, and unlike most people who get an idea, he just made that happen. An army of heroes, of literal named characters, 10,000 strong with many other roles supporting them. They are the Talons of the Emperor, the Brotherhood of Demigods, the Watchers of the Throne, the Adeptus Custodes of the God Emperor of mankind. But who are the Custodes? Where did they come from? And why does this guy like blue women? More on that after this message. Subscribe. Do it. Memberships are open for those who are interested in joining the Discord. We had another impromptu game night, and I'm gonna be real. I need more people to play Deadlock with, please. It's such a fun game. Also, if you take Venator from me, I'm going to cry. For those in the Chosen and Warpsmith tier, you will be getting your name on a model in my army shortly after I actually start getting my Horus Heresy army ready. Well, Horus Heresy transitions into 40k. That's not really the point. And for those of you who stick around for a year, I kit bash you into my army to forever fight in the long war against the Corpse Emperor and his slaves. I don't have much else to shill. Oh, right, there's a button on mobile, like near the like button or something. It's like hype. I don't know what it does, but apparently if enough of you click on it, this video will show up on a leaderboard, and I think that'd be pretty funny if that happened. I literally don't know if it even changes analytics. I'm gonna be real with you. So this is gonna be a long one again, and I'm already late for this video, and we're gonna have to briefly go over the Unification War and the Thunder Warriors. So without trying to make a long segment even longer, humanity progressed thanks to the invisible hand of the Emperor, who was created God knows how many years ago, and eventually we get to the Dark Age of technology where humanity was expanding across the galaxy. Transitioning over to the Age of Strife, or Olden Nights as it's sometimes referred to as, between wars with the Men of Iron, which also it's exactly what it sounds like, as well as the birth of Slaanesh, causing warp storms across the galaxy and cutting off planets from one another for around 5,000 years, Earth and or Terra, as we know it in the setting, went from being a perfect technologically advanced world to collapsing and becoming a desert wasteland that was... okay, look, 40k isn't subtle. Earth was just Mad Max. There were techno-barbarian warlords that controlled the planet, and eventually Big E decided that hiding wasn't going to achieve much, so he decided to reveal himself and his warriors, his Thunder Warriors. In essence, they were savage super soldiers that were physically hardier than Space Marines, but a lot less nuanced in their worldview. They were less of a sword and more of a block of C4. A Space Marine can be sent in to do whatever is asked of them, but Thunder Warriors are less of a letter of concern and more of a public service announcement, blitzing and blasting their way through literally anything in the war. They were a crude tool meant to solve an immediate problem. Most people in a blue-collar job probably have a term for this, and I wouldn't know what it is because I'm an idiot and I went to college and I decided to drop out. When it came to what the Emperor needed for his galaxy as a whole, that became the Space Marines, the Adeptus Custodes, a precision tool perfectly crafted to be his warriors that shall know no fear. But there was also his personal project, the Adeptus Custodes. There's a saying in Warhammer that goes along the lines of something like this: for every 100 guardsmen, there is one Space Marine. For every 100 Space Marines, there is one Grey Knight. For every one Grey Knight, there is a single custodian. Mathematically, this doesn't really make any sense, but it's meant to talk about the power scale of 40k, and we're not going to get into power scaling because I'm not a loser. After the Thunder Warriors were replaced, thanks to the efforts of the Astartes and the Custodes, it became clear what the role of both organizations were going to be. Astartes reconquered the galaxy, and the Custodians stayed with the Emperor. But why? Well, in actuality, it's because the Custodians were the Emperor's bodyguards and his confidants. They were his personal military, meant to be the best of the best. Custodians are made, basically. They're not test tube babies like the Primarchs, but the process of which a Custodian is made is considered and even referred to as being alchemical in nature. When you make a Space Marine, you are shoving organs and cybernetics and hormonal stuff probably into a single human man. When it comes to making a Custodian, you are borderline rewriting the DNA of a human being. The other interesting thing about Custodians, though it makes more sense when you think about it, is that they're all Terran, taken from infancy from the noble houses of Terra, so that way the alchemical process can take root as quickly as possible without much failure in the way to stop it. Another thing, since we're now talking about the Custodians themselves, all of their weaponry is gene-locked, meaning that not anybody can just pick it up and use it. Specifically, their Guardian Spears, especially their new models that seem to have no triggers. Reason for that being is that apparently they're either literally mind-linked to their user and fire on a thought, and some of them in the Heresy have been noted to only need to turn the handle or touch a sensor in order to fire the gun, which I think is pretty cool. It kind of makes it funny, so that way if a Space Marine picked up a Guardian Spear, they wouldn't have any way to actually even override its function. That being said, it also feels kind of dystopian to have your weapon work on Bluetooth. The rest of the war gear I'm going to be saving for later in the video, but honestly a majority of it is just going to be the fact that it's just better war gear. But one thing about the Custodians themselves that's actually incredibly interesting is the fact that they are all individuals. They're a bit honestly, they struggle between being people and not being people. You have a Custodian who took a vow of silence, breaking his vow only to tell a single word bearer that he always hated him. They write poetry and take pleasure in arts in general. Pretty much all of them have doctorates in whatever subject that they take interest in, and that's the key word, interest. They don't study to better themselves in combat purely. Sometimes a Custodian just wants to learn how to bake cookies. That's not even a joke. Training is obviously a big thing for them, and even bigger is the blood games, and don't you worry, we're going to talk about the blood games. But we need to fast forward through the history of the Custodes because there are 3 key important things that heavily affected them into becoming what they are now in 40k. The first is the war in the webway, and I'm really sorry that I'm going to be just blitzing through some of these because they are very long battles, and I'm begging you, if you really like Custodes, go read the Horus Heresy. The war in the webway was probably the most devastating conflict to ever happen to the Custodian Guard. The Custodes are usually referred to as the 10,000, and that number rarely changes. Their war gear to maintain and the alchemical process used to create them is so taxing for the Imperium that they can only ever have 10,000 Custodians and maintain them and their war gear. 9,000 Custodians died in the war in the webway, as did 3 Titans, and a bunch of other things. For anybody who doesn't know, the webway is an Eldari creation of basically being able to do interdimensional travel safely across the galaxy, a la in the same vein as warp travel, but without needing to use the warp. It is much more reliable and so much more safer. Big E, being the hack that he is, wanted to just steal it rather than try to create something of his own or try to get the Eldar to work with him because Big E is the biggest jerk in the galaxy. Also, I'm pretty sure the Eldar like shot at humanity first or something, the, whatever, Chekhov's gun or something. That's not a Chekhov's gun, why did I say that? Then his failure of a son, Magnus the Red, tried to make it to the Imperial Palace and managed to make the Golden Throne not only malfunction, but also create a breach within the webway portal inside the Imperial Palace that now demons of chaos were starting to flood through and trying to invade Terra, forcing Big E to sacrifice his custodians, Sisters of Silence, Titans, and Mechanicum forces all at once just to stop demons from invading Earth. It should be stated that the prospect of the webway was far too much to give up, but even still, Big E was so stubborn that he just couldn't call it quits. I also don't know if he could have even closed the webway portal in the palace, and I think it's still open in current 40k, and like demons occasionally just like pop out. I'm pretty sure they spawn demons in the Imperial Palace and just hunt them for fun. Anyways, the Custodians had to fight hordes of demons, Magnus, and of course 4 traitor legions. It was to the point where I believe the gods of chaos turned their attention onto the battle. The reason why this was a very important battle is because it completely destroyed the Custodians' chain of command, as so many, if not practically all veterans, ended up getting killed, forcing the new Custodians, who, while powerful, were far less experienced than their contemporaries, to lock in and take command. The second obvious thing that heavily affected them was, of course, the death of the Emperor. The Custodians are the defenders of the throne, a brotherhood of demigods, the protectors of the God Emperor of mankind, and they failed. No real appropriate allegory for what this is like other than just saying God died in front of your eyes and it's all your fault. After interring Big E into the Golden Throne, the Custodians went into a collective depression where they locked themselves away in the Imperial Palace and guarded Big E's corpse and the Golden Throne for around 10,000 years. And what's the third thing that ended up happening to the Custodians? Well, there's no real easy way to say this, but 8 bloodthirsters just spawned on Terra and started wrecking shop after the 13th Black Crusade. A good chunk of Custodians died to this random attack, and now with the Great Rift cutting the galaxy entirely in half, it became clear to the Custodians that they couldn't just sit on their asses anymore. They had to be proactive. They couldn't just sit around and wait for the galaxy to come to them. They had to go out there and fight. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Adeptus Custodes were seen fighting out in the Imperium, and that brings us to current day 40k. The history of the Custodians is a moderately long one, and there's a lot more detail that I'm not giving justice, and when I say I'm not giving justice, I genuinely mean I am not giving it justice. Go read the Post-heresy if you want to become a Custodes fan, and there's also the Vault of Terra series, which I believe heavily shows off Custodes, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm really struggling here, I'm gonna be real. I also don't know if Vaults of Terra ever concluded. It might have. In current 40k, what do the Custodes do then? Well, practically anything and everything, though it should be stated obviously that they are very, very good for war. You have a group of demigods with weapons that date back to nearly the Dark Age of technology. Of course, you're gonna end up throwing them at people like a brick. Past that, there are different shield hosts of the Custodians that operate on specific missions. The Solar Watch monitors and protects the Sol system, our solar system. Self-explanatory. Now, why don't we go for something a little bit more terrifying? The Shadow Keepers operate within the vaults underneath the Imperial Palace, sections of highly secure and well-protected facilities that are almost always kept in complete darkness, harboring all manners of world-ending technology and entities that Big E deemed too important and too destructive to keep locked up anywhere else, except for being under his own damn home. And when I say that the vaults, called the Dark Cells, are well-protected, I mean that they literally have every manner of security measure put in place, from religious runes, saintic circles, and I believe gene-coded locks, to having Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests staffed on-site 24/7 to ensure everything is up to snuff, as well as of course having the Shadow Keepers themselves on patrol at all times. And then there's everyone's favorite, the Aquilin Shields. These guys just show up. They are tasked with protecting people who are deemed to be important for either the future of the Imperium or so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and say you are a guardsman who is on some backwater world getting invaded by the Tyranids. You fight, and eventually a Carnifex gets sick of you existing and wants you dead. Right as you're about to get tank shocked, a golden light blinds you, and you see 5 golden gods clad in armor as big as a chimera body block the Carnifex and begin to wrestle it down onto the ground and start to kill it. Suddenly, this last-ditch defense goes from being a loss to a supreme victory, as you are now protected by 5 named characters. And why? Because someone said you were going to become the greatest general this sector has seen in the last 4,000 years. That's only some of the main shield hosts, and frankly, they're the only ones I actually care about, because we now need to talk about these ladies, the Sisters of Silence. It's time for more science stuff, but this time it's fake science, so it's easier. kinda. In 40k, you have a soul, meaning that you have a presence in the warp. Because of this, you have the ability to become awakened as a psyker, learn psychic powers, and obviously you are more susceptible to the powers of the warp, such as chaos corruption. Eldar are more sensitive than others, humans are kind of in the middle, and the kin from the Leagues of Votann are clones, so their presence in the warp is incredibly weak. Then there are those who have no presence at all. These are pariahs, or blanks. These are the Sisters of Silence, ladies with the pariah gene and virtually have no soul. So what are the benefits that you get from this? Well, they're immune to psychic attacks, and because of this, it means that they're incredibly effective at not just hunting down psykers, but also fighting demons, because demons are literally psychic energy made manifest into being. In fact, their entire organization exists for those reasons. During the Great Crusade, it became obvious that psykers couldn't contain the more powerful psykers, and after the Great Crusade, these ladies proved instrumental in fighting demons because the Adeptus Custodes had virtually no way of combating them, outside of just, beating the ever-living crap out of them. The other thing about blanks, which is the not so good thing, is that if you're near them, it's not even the fact that you feel uncomfortable, it's the fact that it genuinely causes you discomfort and borderline pain to be around them. And if you're a psyker, it's basically like setting you on fire. My favorite thing about these girls is that they're just ladies. Like, they're ladies. They're not like a crazy alchemical process demigods. They have very little cybernetics, if any, and they're trained to keep up with custodians. Obviously, they're not as strong as custodians, but, they can keep the pace at least. Tithes, which is something that we're going to bring up later, shows off a Sister of Silence, heavy quotations, fighting a rogue psyker, and it's honestly the most beautiful and horrifying thing to witness. A literal maelstrom of psychic energy, and she can just walk up right over there without getting decimated. They used to be their own army, but thankfully they are now actually fully folded into the Adeptus Custodes, and honestly, they're kind of interesting to run in-game. In previous editions, they couldn't be targeted by psychic attacks at all. Right now, they're just kind of tanky against them, but it has its uses. Well, it would if the psychic phase was a thing. Speaking of Custodes, why don't we talk about their wargear? You have the Guardian Spear. This mess of a Final Fantasy rejected designed gunblade is what you imagine. It's a bolter with a spear. They're more handy than you think, and given the fact that the Custodian is able to pull off some Dynasty Warriors level madness, mid-combo they're just firing off bolt rounds like they're playing Devil May Cry. I need to remind you, Custodians are basically all named characters. Speaking of names, this is kind of a fun fact. Custodes' names are massive. One Custodian named character, who we'll get to, his name is the length of an entire book. It's supposed to reflect the deeds and the feats that they've committed during their time in service to the Emperor, and if you've ever seen that Cetra the Imperishable meme, it's basically that, except I think most Custodians' names are still longer than Cetra's titles. But if a Guardian Spear is in your shtick, why don't you use the Castellan Axe? It's a bit slower, but it hits so damn hard that you're able to one-shot Space Marines. But nah, we need to go better. So grab an Adresite Spear, which is basically a disintegration weapon, or a Pyrite Spear, which is a Guardian Spear with a goddamn multi-melta strapped on the end of it. There's more weapons, but more importantly is the rest of their war gear, such as relics. Do you know what a moment shackle is? It's a piece of Dark Age technology that is able to literally stop time and influence it in a way that you desire. In-game, Trajan Valoris, the big man Captain General, is able to use it to either double his attack stat or give him a 2-up invulnerable save, meaning that you're only ever taking damage when you roll a 1. There's a few more relics, and they're also just kind of weird and craziness, and it's to the point where most of them kind of just feel like magic. But the point that I'm trying to get at is that the Custodes are the only army in 40k that is allowed to still use their gear from the Heresy, which sucks, but it's also at least implemented in-game by the fact that you can literally, as a Custodes player, take units from 30k into 40k. Speaking of 30k, Custodians for the longest time had this issue on the tabletop. Custodes were not an army for a very long time. There was stats for one Custodian in Rogue Trader, but that doesn't count. They weren't an army. Eventually they got released in 7th edition. Right before 8th edition, which is when Primaris came out, and ended up changing the scale of Space Marines in 40k, meaning that all the tall golden gods or 40k that just came out were already out of scale, and we also have this awful stunted midget looking thing. I mean look at him, it's horrendous. But the Heresy has come to the rescue once again. Who would have seen that coming? And we're now getting sized appropriate Custodians. I will go ahead and be the first to admit it, some of the aura has been lost, but I think that's mostly down to the choice color of gold that they're using, as well as the poses not being particularly dynamic and some of them somewhat static, but still, it's a good start. And yes, there's women, we're going to talk about that at the end. Other than that, the custodians have dreadnoughts because of course they do. Fun fact, sometimes a custodian will inter themselves into a dreadnought as a form of penance because the custodians hold themselves up to such a high standard that it's almost detrimental. So if that's the case, what happens if a custodian gets wounded or, God forbid, gets old? If a custodian finds himself to be suboptimal, say a 1/10 of a second of reaction time lost over millennia of service, they will retire, turn in their war gear to be used for the next custodian, and they will journey out into the Imperium and become an Eye of the Emperor. They act as enforcers, spy masters, and generally one-man armies that act on the will of the Emperor and do their best to protect and fight for the Imperium. Eyes of the Emperor are honestly one of the cooler aspects of the Custodians, and if you're a DM in a Wrath and Glory campaign, I'd wager it'd be cool if the players ran into what they assumed was just an ancient space marine, and either due to conflicting ideas or just because your players are goddamn loot goblins, they come to realize that what they end up fighting is not a heresy-era veteran, but one of the 10,000. Old men in a young man's game type stuff. Also, if you're a fan of like jet bikes or like grav vehicles and so on and so forth, and really just anything from the heresy era, like disintegration weapons and a bunch of other crazy, weird, wacky things, it just play the Custodes. Honestly, they have you covered, at least for the meantime, and it's from what it seems like, they're the only faction that GW is allowing to carry stuff over from the heresy. God, please let me carry over Mechanicum stuff. I'm begging you, GW. That's not the point. It literally becomes one of the armies that you are able to almost one-for-one transition from 40k to 30k if you are interested in that at all. I know my idea for Custodes specifically, if and when I get around to doing them, because they're just a stat block army, so they're not particularly hard to play, is that instead of having them be gold, I wanted their armor to look all stone-like with like silver accents, maybe hearkening to some sort of dark secret that they're not worthy to actually wear Aramite, and also because he kind of looks like Doctor Doom, and I just love that so much. Beyond that, there are two custodian named characters that we need to talk about. The first is the current Captain General in 40k, and that is the big man in charge, Trajan Valoris. He is by far the least interesting of the two, and that's not to say that's because he's boring. Trajan is very much a show don't tell. A lot of his feats are more or less just him existing. He helped assemble the Sisters of Silence in modern 40k back into the Talons of the Emperor. He's fought in several shadow wars that have never been discussed, and unlike most named characters in 40k, he isn't charging headfirst into battle to get killed. His position dictates that he be a leader, a tactician, a general, and he takes all of this seriously. Except for that one time a Norn emissary nearly kicked his head off, but you know, he's rarely had any close calls, and by virtue of his station, he is also considered a High Lord of Terra, and is one of the most powerful people in the Imperium, because the Adeptus Custodes answer to nobody. They are a fully autonomous organization that only listens to Gilman solely because he's the Emperor's son. They literally could tell him to pound sand if they wanted to. And, you know, as a matter of fact, if any organization had a right to tell someone to kick rocks and eat dirt, it would probably be them. But failure after failure after failure, the Custodes are done with being the most ironic faction in 40k, of being golden gods who did nothing but lose. It's time for them to be what they were made to do. And one person is doing what he's made for. Constantine Valdor. This is spoilers for the Beckwin books, which, and also I believe some parts of the Eisenhorn series by Dan Abnett. The third book in the Beckwin trilogy is still not out, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say this right now, probably skip like 5 minutes ahead of time, and if you really just want to hear me talk about female custodians, because this stuff kind of gets weird. This is your last warning. So, Constantine Valdor. He's really interesting in a few ways. Not only did he not like Space Marines, he didn't like the Primarchs themselves, with the exception of Sanguinius, because, you know, everybody struggles to hate the glorious Hawk Boy. He was a very critical person, but not necessarily unwavering. He was loyal to the Imperium and, by extension, begrudgingly loyal to Big E. But that's the interesting thing about him. Valdor did not like Big E. Big E valued that in some way, or seemingly, but we'll go ahead and get to that in a minute, because Valdor maintained his independence and maintained free will despite the fact that the Emperor was incredibly charismatic. He was not loyal to him, to the idea of the Imperium, I suppose, at least the Imperium in 30k. Valdor was so important to Big E that Big E waged a minor side war during the Unification War to solely retrieve Valdor when he was a child and make him into a custodian. He was there for the Unification War, for the execution of the Thunder Warriors, for the burning of Prospero, the siege of Terra. He literally had a part in inventing the Blood Games, a sort of battle royale training sport where the custodians act as an invading force and fight against one another to try and see if they can breach the palace defenses to get into a position where they could, heavy quotations, kill the Emperor. Trajan Valoris, by the way, has won 2 Blood Games. And one day after the scouring, searching the galaxy for traitors, Valdor just disappears. His last words, and I don't even know if his last words are ever heard by anybody, as he looked back at the Imperial Palace, he said to it, "Only in death." Many millennia later, Inquisitor Gregor Eisenhorn and his associate Elizabeth Beckwin were investigating the enigmatic figure that threatened the Imperium itself, a man known as the King in Yellow. A man who searched the Black Library for the true name of the Emperor, has amassed an army of pariah space marines, maybe even people who are up to the power level of custodians, and garnered so much ire that almost all traitor legions and Eldari craft worlds were fighting against him in the vain hope that they may defeat him. And only in a pocket dimension known as the City of Dust did Beckwin happen upon a book. Its contents were not some grand prose, not some recounting of a great battle or even instructions. It was a name for hundreds of pages. And the first words in this book were Constantine Valdor. What the hell is this guy's deal? Let's go back to his last words. Only in death is the first part of a full mantra, which is only in death does duty end, denoting unwavering service to the Emperor. Valdor, throughout his time in the heresy, vehemently expressed his distaste for literally everybody, from the Emperor to the Space Marines to the Primarchs, and in some way to the Imperium itself. Maybe the Imperium as it stands now and not the Imperium as it was back then, as the Imperium nowadays is an absolute husk of what it was meant to be, an empire of mankind where it had no enemies to bear against it. Then, why the Army of Blanks? Why seek the Emperor's true name? Is he trying to free the Emperor from the throne? Is he trying to take his place? Maybe if the Emperor dies, his soul can finally be free and achieve apotheosis and become a full-on god? Is this tying back to the Terminus Decree? What is going on? The truth is that we don't know what's going on with Constantine. He was sought out specifically by the Emperor, a man who he did not hold in high regard at all, and yet served him, and his final words were only in death, harkening back to life and service to the Emperor himself. I don't know if we're going to get answers soon, as the Beckwin trilogy has one last book in it, and at least it's planned, but unreleased. Is Valdor coming back? Is this a wild goose chase? It's really hard to say, and the Beckwin trilogy, as far as I know, is one of the more slower series that are going on right now. I think it took about like 9 years between books 1 and 2. Now, we have to talk about the elephant in the room and tie everything right back together. We're talking about female custodians. So, I'm gonna go ahead and make this extremely clear. I don't care about female custodians. I really don't care. Not that I don't like them. I just don't give a damn. GW took what was a very easy retcon and a great addition to the lore and completely ruined it not once, not twice, but 3 whole times. The first is that female custodians were revealed not in a codex, not in a book, but a tweet. Yep, this, god damn it. This entire retcon, and yes, it is a retcon, but that's not the point, was done on a website owned by a dude who thinks that this truck design is really good. Just, what the hell, man? It's not like, this is just stupid, but sure, whatever. Custodians might get a female character that isn't a Sister of Silence finally, and, you know, oh, hey, look, there's a new Custodians character reveal, and that is the ugliest goddamn thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I generally thought it was a woman because GW has literally no idea how to sculpt female heads. Take a look at Eminem real quick. But upon closer inspection, this is just a dude who got kicked in the face by a horse. Okay, hey, Tides is out. It's an animation and it looks super cool and super well done. You know, feelings about Warhammer Plus aside. There's a custodian and damn, it's a woman. I wonder how, and everybody hates her for a lot of reasons and not just because she's a woman, but oh my god, okay, let's unpack Tides for a bit. I'm gonna go ahead and say this. I liked Tides. I thought it was very well done, especially the one about ammo shortage, but when it came to Tides Episode 2 with the Custodian and the Sister of Silence, I can very much see why people did not like female custodians if this was our first impression on them. I'm not going to go ahead and explain this lady's actions because I forget her name, it's like Shiva or something, and explain why it is in line with how custodians would actually act. In Tides Episode 2, it features heavily a Custodian, Sisters of Silence, as well as Arbites and Psychers. Throughout the entire run of the episode, the Custodian acts very, how do I describe this? I'm sorry, this is going to be like one of the few times I actually cursed in this video. Finally, she acts like an asshole, lying to the populace, starting beef with Space Marines, and ordering for said Space Marines to not only abandon their oaths to the planet and the people, but also to exterminate the planet because Tyranids were invading it. If you were a level-headed individual, you would know that the Custodian is not trying to get everybody in a state of panic. That's why she lies about the planet being not in danger. You'd know the way that she acts curt and firm is because she's a literal demigod here to do a duty and nothing more. And you know that she's disrespectful to Space Marines because Space Marines are literally the reason as to why the Imperium is in the awful state that it is. Space Marines put Big E on the golden throne. Is it right? No, but this is 40k and nothing is right. Everybody is varying shades of evil. Calling exterminatus on a world that's being invaded by Tyranids is pretty cruel, but the problem is that we have evidence that it works. And you know, if it works, it works. You can't really ask for much in the 41st millennia. So people already didn't like female custodies. People were already looking for a reason to hate them more, and GW, while lore accurate, introduced a new idea by making said character a complete and utter jackass. I don't know how else to say this, but if you're going to introduce something new to an audience and you want them to like it, you have to start by making it likable. That being said, dear God, did you see her fighting? Because it is some of the coolest things I've ever seen in animation, at least for 40k, which, let's be real, that's not a high bar, but that's besides the point. She moves so fast and in such an inhuman way, it perfectly encapsulates how I envision Custodians fighting. Literally like a character action game a la Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. But people who hated female Custodians were never going to like them to begin with, and they were looking for more reasons to hate them. If you dislike female Custodians, that's fine, I don't care. If you are one of those people who hate female Custodians because it's a lore retcon, I can somewhat respect that. But if you hate female Custodians because girls aren't allowed, let me raise you this. Maybe your rice grain-sized brain might absorb some knowledge this day. The Emperor sought to enlighten all of mankind. At least this is what people delude themselves into believing. The Emperor's not a good person, but that's besides the point. Mankind includes women. The Emperor employed many different people under him, including Erda Astartes, who is the creator of the Space Marines. The Emperor does not give a damn about your gender. If you are one of those people who thinks that the Emperor loves mankind rather than treating them like stepping stools into his plan, then you'd accept that the Emperor cared about both men and women and everybody in between. For the Space Marines, it's been fully established for forever that the GNC doesn't work on women, and that's fine. The process used to create Astartes can only be done on men. This is well established. Space Marines are a stepping stone to Custodes, a literal alchemical and gene editing process that can completely alter the individual being modified. They are the apex of human life, at least an apex that can be offered up. Why the hell wouldn't the Emperor include women in this step? Because girls are stinky, grow up, man. You can not like something, that's totally fine. I see no issue with someone's excuse for not liking something literally being, I don't like it, because sometimes that's literally the only valid reason you can give. But if you want to argue the semantics about how the God Emperor of mankind had zero vision for women in his Imperium, please find the closest shower, I am begging you. Assuming you're a human listening to this, you came out of a woman. I'm not getting into a debate about gender identity and other stuff like that, just biologically, by default, as a human being, you got popped out of some lady bits. Women are an integral part of humanity as much as men are. That is a fact. I don't care about your politics. I don't care about your ideologies. You cannot have one. You have to have both. Space Marines have always had an explicit lore reason as to why they are only male. Custodians, as far as I know, never did. GW just said that the 10,000 were male. They never explicitly stated the process to make a custodian could not work on women, but they just decided to word their retcon in the worst way possible and do it the worst ways possible. I think female custodians are okay. I'm not ranting and raving about them being the end of 40k, and you're not going to catch me crying and soiling my pants in the Eye of Terror subreddit, or is it Horus Galaxy? I forget. I'm glad that people have their echo chamber to complain about stuff with each other, because honestly, if the worst thing you're gonna do in your life is complain that your little plastic men can have boobs now, you know, go ahead. Freedom of speech, it's your right, you're entitled to that. All I'm trying to say is that if you are truly the best of the best, the pinnacle of creation of the human race and what it has to offer, why would you not have two sides of the same coin? One cannot exist without the other, and if the goal of humanity is to one day ascend and join the Emperor in perfection and prowess, then yeah, having some badass ladies go do Dynasty Warriors on some space bugs is right by me. Yes, we have female representation in other factions. It's not like women are starved of that in 40k, except for the fact that GW can't sculpt female faces, but that's besides the point. But most women just go ahead and pick orcs and Tyranids anyways, because traditionally women just find ugly things cute, and I mean, hey, I get it. It's a slim chance, but maybe there's one little girl out there who finds Polly Pocket isn't her thing. Oh my god, do they even have that anymore? I'm so old. And instead, having muscle-bound golden women ripping aliens in half is their thing. Because even if this change, this minor retcon, gets a single woman into this faction, I think that's a win. Because hell, I never thought my videos would be played around someone's daughter, and maybe in the vain hope that kid maintains their interest, who knows? Maybe she'll end up beating up space bugs with golden ladies stronger than space marines. I may not be the biggest fan of kids, but that sounds like a goddamn good childhood. To quote from a custodian Dreadnought, "I have fought atop the walls of the Emperor's palace when the great beast Swa crashed against them. There I fell, yet was reborn in this ageless body of Aramite. I fought upon the battlefields of Gosarsis during the Moray Schism, and crushed the servants of the Dark Mechanicum without mercy. I stood immovable in the face of the blood cults of Sidon, and slew all who came against me. I still fight, and so I shall, for my debt to the Emperor shall never be paid." Thanks for listening. And thank you as always to these fine folks. Sorry if I got a little bit preachy at the end, but you know, people suck, and I'm trying to garner a community that's not full of scumbags because I might have to start banning some people, but you know, we'll see how that goes. But a big ol' thanks to Adam M, Alexander McCabe, Balting Dragon, CB Drawer 95, Captain Bubbles, NV, Javier Soto, Josh from Allstate, Mount Papa 11, Omidium, Overdraft Perfection, Regular Alley, Ritz, the God Emperor of R, The Hog, The Coffee Addict, Toaster, Zachary Y, Arctic Berserker, Core Spore, and Matt the Jam Man. And an even bigger thank you to these absolute psychopaths. I had to run this list through the program twice because for some reason they kept putting somebody in this tier, but you know, looking back at it, I'm pretty sure this is correct now. But a big ol' thank you to Istra, Ape Rain Esquire, Commander Apo CC1119, Dism, Felix, Gap G, Human Spirit Indomitus, John Papa John Stumo, Nameless Ghoul Ease, Everlost Man, Solace in the Void, Up, Up, Down, Down, Left, Right, Crazy Axeman, Icigo 11, Robbie Nito, and Vulcan equals Best Primarch. Oh, next video is Trench Crusade, by the way, because I don't want to talk about Blood Angels yet. I'm going to be real. I just really don't want to talk about Blood Angels. Members videos sometime this month. God, my God, that recording is 44 minutes long. I'm going to dunk my head in a bucket of water. I'll see you guys later.